Hello, and welcome to another episode of The Operations Room, a podcast for COOs. I am Brandon Minsinger, joined by my lovely co-host as usual, Bethany Ayers. How are things going, Bethany?
I have a cold. I haven't had a cold in a very long time, I feel, and I'm not handling it particularly well. Not because, I mostly just decided to ignore that I have a cold and see how much I can do through cold medicine alone and powering through.
I mean, given the fact that this episode is about resilience, you're diving into it right now, the resilience to colds affecting you and your performance.
Yeah, I'm not sure if it's resilience or just stupidity. Partially it's because really enjoying my job, have so much to do, don't want to take a sick day. And then also I'm desperately trying to get into a good fitness routine and habit. And so I just don't want the cold to disrupt any of that.
So anything else going on in your world these days? What's happening?
So the office. Our office is an old WeWork. This week, we got our storage units and so Matomic's color is like a dark purple. I'm not loving our brand colors because to build slides, we have dark purple, medium purple, light purple, gray purple.
A rainbow of purples happening there.
Yeah, which is limiting, let's say. But it means that we got storage that is light purple. So it's one of our brand colors. And then I am slowly bringing plants in from our house because we have an overrun of plants. My husband doesn't like how many plants are here anyhow. So I carried an aloe vera in with me on the overground yesterday. You should have seen the looks I was getting. People are walking around the spikes. But we have that in now. And then we got a drinks fridge. And so now all of our drinks, instead of being in Tesco bags, sitting in the corner, are in the refrigerator. And one of our teammates sent out a message on Slack yesterday because we had an office day. Can everybody spend their first 10 minutes cleaning up around their spaces and organizing their wires? And the office looks really nice now. So now we have a lot of office pride. And it's really nice to walk in and not just be like, is this a dorm room?
Oh, that's amazing. So is there a bit of a sense of positivity response-wise with folks around the office?
Yeah. And I've had feedback that it feels like a new company and it feels like a grown-up company. And also that I would have hated the old office. Whatever was going on in the old office. I can't remember if I told you, there was the only furniture that made it in from the old office I just hated. They brought the best furniture over. And it was these bean bag sofas. Because it's a beanbag, it's low on the ground. So you have to sit about a foot off the ground. And they're corduroy and kind of appley, minty green, very worn. And it's just what is this? And that was the best furniture. So it's just these have to go.
So here's a miniature positive thing that happened this past week, which is for the all hands meeting. So we now have an office in New York City. We have roughly, let's say, 15 employees there. And as always, for all hands, the comms connection between London and New York is very important. So everyone can hear each other properly, be able to ask questions properly. And, we now have more employees in the London office. And it's also important that the speakers are projected and amplified, whereby you can hear them at the back of the room effectively. This past week, we had our first all-hands meeting where everything worked perfectly. It was amazing. I was so proud of the team because I feel like we've gone on a bit of an evolution here. I decided to not get a technical outside AV consultant to come in to help us select equipment and put it all together and all that jazz. My brilliant idea was to do it myself, DIY, because we're scale up, budget conscious. Went on ChatGPT, mapped out what I needed to buy, how it all connected together. I had this kind of 10-page PDF document that showed the visuals. I was like, how hard can this be?
I mean, congratulations. I know how complicated because I've been starting to try and look at it for us as well. And first of all, it's so expensive. And secondly, quite complicated.
I will send you my 10-page PDF.
Please do. Yeah, I'll share it. That could be our next subscription content is Brandon's 10-page PDF if you want to do your own.
So let's move on. We've got a great topic for today, which is resilience in organizations. We have an amazing guest for this, which is Aušrinė. She is the co-founder of Operations Nation, which we have a long-standing relationship with. And they have their conference upcoming, I believe this October, which I'm sure will be fantastic and will be joining as well. So before we get to Aušrinė, I just wanted to ask you a couple of questions, Bethany. The first one was, many organizations fall into this just get it done mode during the growth phase or kind of the scale up phase. How do you balance getting stuff done, getting shit done, and speed versus building sustainable systems or having an eye towards that? What should a COO be thinking about?
So part of it is I'm a real fan of just-in-time process and just enough process. And I think there's a tendency for some people to want to do it all rather than what actually matters. And when you want to do it all and build out something perfect, that's what slows down the business versus what will speed people up for now and remove the mental load for now without producing a huge amount of work. So for one example for me is HubSpot, your CRM. People want to capture everything and lots of like just in cases, what ifs, what if we need to know it in the future? And I don't want that salespeople have to fill in all of that information because the more required boxes you make, the worse the quality is and the less the salespeople will do it. So one of the things that I always task RevOps with is how much of the data can be sourced elsewhere and automatically put in so that nobody has to touch it. And then for the sales team, I make a commitment that the only required fields are the ones that actually matter. And we keep it to the bare minimum and explain what they are. So for me, it's close date, stage, what products are we selling if we have more than one product, the most recent accurate deal value. Everything else should or could be automated in some way, particularly now that AI exists and you have all of these tools that will help you start to populate your HubSpot. We'll put in your MedPick stuff. We'll tell you what size of company, industry, t-shirt size, whatever, like just stuff that marketing wants to know or execs wants to know that is not actually critical. And so that's one example of it. But I'm always thinking about like, what do we actually need versus the Rolls Royce that somebody wants that is totally pointless right now.
I think with things like HubSpot, I think that's such a great example because either it is totally not set up in any way that is like helpful to anyone, which is sometimes the case. And in other cases, you have the over-engineering effect where, leadership wants to see charts A, B, and C, but they don't quite know what they want. So therefore, we need to have 25 charts to satisfy any potential desire on the part of leadership, especially when you hire professionals to come in. They have a tendency to kind of like go the full route and it's just not needed. And I think sometimes contractors in this way are actually quite useful at early stages because they're very good at what they do, but they're also very wise in terms of like understanding the stage that you're at and what's appropriate to get done, and also counseling the head of sales in a little more, kind of discreet fashion in terms of, let's not go crazy here. Let's just do A, B, and C. The other thing that I think about is what matters to the business in the next 12 months, maybe 18 months, and enabling that to happen and prioritizing that is the key bit. A good example in this case would be onboarding sales reps. So if we're going into a phase where we're starting to hire a higher number batch-wise of sales reps coming in or BDRs coming in, a reasonable amount of effort put into the onboarding process to ensure that from zero productivity to X amount of productivity, whereby they're actually achieving quota step by step, that matters. That's a return on investment.
I agree. And it's also, so what matters to the business and what are the KPIs? We just banty about KPI and we don't think about what it means, which is key performance indicators, not every performance indicator. And I feel like people start to measure too many things. One, because they're like, oh, why is that? So, we better answer it this way. And, let's look at this. And then suddenly you're looking at 7 different metrics, whereas really you just need to look at the one. And then when you go, that's going wrong, you can go and investigate and figure out what's happening. And that's when you look at the others, but you don't need to look at it every week. So and then also I think sometimes people, and I'm definitely guilty of this myself, of like, it's hard to really believe that less is more. And if I only look at 2 things or only provide one idea that's really good, was that good enough? Or should I provide 10? And so if like your BDR is coming in, what does success look like for them? They should have 1 leading indicator, 1 lagging indicator. And then they really know what their job is. So depending on what your outbound is and what your motion is that works for you, if dials still matter, like how many connects are they making a day? So, they're picking up the phone. If you're like, it's not always connects anymore because some industries, people will not pick up the phone. So let's assume they still do. And then the other one is not how many meetings are they, early days, how many meetings are they booking? Because you have you need some momentum, but fundamentally, how many are actually making it to being sat and converted. So the quality, and that's it. And then they're doing that or they're not. So they're performing or they're not. They've hit their ramp or they haven't. They stay, they go, and not all this other stuff.
So the other one I was thinking about was there's always this question of when do you start taking security seriously and start doing ISO for B2B enterprise companies and so on. And it sometimes depends on your target audience that you're going after and how important that is for your customers, obviously. But I think this is a classic one where deferring it as much as you possibly can, where it doesn't impact the deals themselves in terms of getting them done. And you can make, certain future commitments in your contract saying, look, we are thinking about ISO, it'll be done in the future. You can do that longer than you think, to be honest, in my view.
I'm probably the other way, where when it's small, it's less of a problem. When you're big, it's a bigger problem. And if you start with some of it, well, I guess also because I'm now in cyber, so of course we have to do it. Like absolutely everybody wants to see the certificates all the time. But before, selling into enterprise as well, like if you don't have your SOC 2, your ISO 27001, you just have to share this massive document every single time because an enterprise isn't going to do it without. And a lot of that you're in the document sharing is kind of stuff you have to do anyhow for them. And so I'm the other way, because particularly now that there are tools that help you. So we used Vanta at Peak. We're using Drata at Matomic. And then there's another one that I just heard about the other day. Delve, maybe? I'm making it up.
Yeah. Is this for DDQs or for ISO?
It's for all of it, apparently. ISO, SOC 2, and HIPAA. And they say they can do it in something like 24 hours for you, but it's a tech. Obviously, you have to put in the rest of it. I guess it depends on what stage you're talking about and who you sell to. But if you're selling to enterprise, you're going to have to show that you know what you're talking about and you're guardians of their data anyhow.
It's actually fascinating. This is a bit of a digression now, but I'm heavily involved in DDQs right now myself. So we're just prior to our Series B. And, we're in a target audience of law firms that are very, focused on security, obviously, and confidentiality and these sorts of things. 80% of customers that come through now are asking formal DDQ responses that are required, that are massive in size. So we are super hot right now to make this as friction-free as humanly possible for the sales team. We're using a product called Platformed, and Platform is AI product whereby it ingests your documentation and will automatically take the format that's being given to it, respond into that formatted template that's been provided to you from the customer, and try to automate as much as humanly possible. And the fascinating bit is, we probably have 60% auto answers with no edits required by a human being, and 60%, in my opinion, is very, very low. I don't quite understand why that's the case, because the fact of the matter is every question we get that we haven't previously answered, that we answer as a net new manually, obviously goes back into the AI, whereby it knows it at that point. And for some reason, the percentage increase that we're seeing is just incredibly slow, like 50% to 51 to 52 over time. And it's just like, this has to be at 80 as soon as possible, because we have a ton of DDQs upcoming this quarter. And if we don't get ahead of this right now, we're going to have people doing all sorts of crazy manual labor right now to get these responses in place. So we're now competitively looking at other products that are not platform, but other AI vendors that do this to see what the actual difference is in terms of the speed, turnaround, quality of the answers, and the AI, the auto answer with no edit kind of percentage. And we have a bit of a sample set that we're using. So I'm quite fascinated to see what the result's going to be.
The technology is moving so quickly. I'd be interested to hear. I've just shared the link for you for Delve.
Do you have any examples of stuff that you would have done earlier in terms of kind of back office enablement to get ahead of things? Any mistakes that you think you've made in the past where if you got into it earlier, it would have been a wiser course of action as opposed to punting and deferring?
Nothing is immediately coming to mind. Like I think, and also the world is so different now with AI and the ability to automate in a way that we didn't used to. So rather than things that I wish we had done differently, is as soon as you start to do something repetitively, I've asked the team to, is there a solution for this? So how do we automate invoicing? How do we automate cash collection? How do we automate our data collection for HubSpot? Because agents and AI is so smart now, how can we use that for a lot of the busy work that we used to have? But it's just new. So if I look back at my old career, it's so different that it's almost like irrelevant.
What do you think of this? when you go through organizational design and your organizational design works to a certain point and they need to reorg. And with the reorg, as you're getting larger in size, the problems change somewhat. You're trying to reorg to ensure that it's suitable for the next time period of the company. But companies seem to get trapped in this loop of like, it seems to happen faster than it should in some respects in terms of like, we've done a reorg. Now 12 months later, we need to do another reorg to kind of resort things because things aren't working for whatever reason. Do you have any kind of thoughts on that and maybe any kind of tips in terms of how to think about organizational design to make them as durable as possible?
I guess part of the question is, should it be durable? Right, particularly in a scale up, right? If you're 50% or 100% bigger than you were a year ago, it probably makes sense to do a redesign. And then also, if you look at the big companies, they do it every single year and they're not even growing anymore. I think some of it is just to keep employees, like it's a way of getting some level of advancement and keeping people who have been there for ages interested still. Every 1 to 2 years that people have brand new jobs again. So I think that there's also just some natural tensions in businesses where there isn't one solution, which is why people swing back and forth. So regional versus global, you get that a lot. Like, should you have global functions and then regional leaders, or should all of the power be in the regions and a very light coordination from global? And you see companies pendulum back and forth between those two. And then culture-wise, some seem to land more in one way or the other, or just a complexity thing. So that's one where you see businesses going back and forth. The other one is it better to do pods of mixed teams that actually work together who, it's always the dotted line versus the straight line. So in development, should you have your multidisciplinary pod with one leader, or should everybody manage up to their functional leaders and then be a dotted line into their pod? And again, I've seen both work and I've seen people flip back and forth loads, but ultimately people's day-to-day jobs don't change. They're still working with the same people. They're still solving the same problems. It's just who do they have their one-to-ones with? And sometimes I think we're overly concerned about things. It matters because it like matters where managers go, but individuals who do the job every day, it doesn't really matter to them if they're sitting in an engineering pod versus sitting in a whatever stupid name pod, because they all come up with their stupid names. Atlantis pod, you know.
Last question. Aušrinė talked about personal resilience and her framework of 5 types of personal resilience. And I'll just read these out just to refresh our memories and a bit of commentary from you in terms of what you make of these. But number 1, optimistic resilience, the ability to reframe difficult situations and find something positive in them. Stoic resilience, the mental discipline to accept reality and take action without overthinking or unnecessary suffering. Number 3, pragmatic resilience, the wisdom to choose your battles, protect your energy, and walk away from situations that don't serve you. Number 4, active resilience, the act of seeking support, self-advocating, and using your network rather than struggling in isolation. And the last one, existential resilience, the ability to zoom out, see the bigger picture, and recognize that most problems are temporary and not life-defining. What do you make of those 5? And does Bethany have a kind of a stacked, ranked set of layers here that she uses?
Part of what you need to do is understand the situation you're in. And then I think I just intuitively will apply one of those to the situation. Actually, what's interesting for me is they're all very much as an individual, how you can soothe yourself in effect, or, you know, like reframing it in some way, or they're all versions of reframing, aren't they? So it's either reframing to be positive, reframing that it isn't my problem, reframe, you know, understanding that I can't solve it, understanding that it's not such a big deal. But one of the concepts that I really like and came across actually via my therapist a couple of years ago is the idea of like nervous system regulation. And fundamentally what you're trying to do is get your nervous system to be regulated again. And all of these are around self-regulation. But sometimes it's impossible to self-regulate. You're in a situation where it's just beyond your ability to self-soothe. And then it's going out into needing somebody else to help co-regulate. Like children do this all the time. So they hurt themselves, they run to their parent, and through holding them, talking to them, soothing them, they can calm down and they're not able to self-regulate themselves. And so the ability to, you know, try these techniques, and if I'm still not being able to regulate, I'll notice that I'm making contact with others. And I think that's also why some people end up being the ones that everybody goes to, is because they're quite good at, we intuitively notice who's well regulated. And generally, if somebody has a very regulated nervous system, they can help you get your nervous system regulated again. So I guess for me, the advice is just, if these things aren't working, or you're finding that it's impossible to get yourself back down, sometimes you need to look externally as well.
So out of the 5, do you have one that you lean on particularly?
I think I'm probably the last one of in the big picture, does this matter? Zooming out, will I remember this in a year's time? When's the last time I did something that I can even remember? I can remember sometimes the freak out of feeling horrible, but I can't even remember what the event was anymore. And so it's this is where we're at, and this is not a big deal. It's probably my number one go-to. I mean, I can't remember what I ate for breakfast 3 days ago. So this is going to be long gone in a month, let alone in a year.
All right, let's wrap up here, and we will move on to our conversation with Aušrinė. We are revving up the engine of the podcast and looking for a great brand to sponsor the show. We have over 7,000 listeners now across COOs, CEOs, founders, and operational professionals who are decision makers for all kinds of technology, including HR, planning, strategy, legal, and other tools.
It's Beth here. I just wanted to thank you for listening to the podcast, and we'd love to keep it going, but we're going to need to get some sponsors in order to do that. So if you work at a company that could benefit from speaking to listeners like you, or know of a company that might benefit, please send them our way.
To find out more, go to operationsroom.co/sponsorship. That is operationsroom.co/sponsorship.
My first story comes from a book called Pollyanna by Eleanor Porter. And I read it when I was probably 10 years old. And it was about a small orphan who always remained this relentlessly cheerful, thanks to a game that she invented called Glad Game. The core of it was finding out something to be glad about in every situation, no matter how bleak that situation was. And, for Christmas, for example, she got a crutch because that was the only thing, if I remember correctly, that was left in this, kind of like a charity that her dad was involved. And instead of being really upset, she thought, well, I've got a crutch. Well, at least I don't need to use it. At least I don't have a broken leg. Then I don't really remember the rest of the book. But at 10 years old, this game kind of stuck with me. As you're a kid, you kind of go about your day and you play the situations in your hand. Probably shows my age. I didn't play computer games back then. And I think I started applying this to my daily lives, kind of trying to find situations that I shouldn't be happy about and take myself out of this unhappiness by training my mind to kind of spot opportunities in difficult moments. So, it's not about denying any sort of hardship. It's about acknowledging the situation that you're in and asking at the same time, what can I be glad about? So this one I called optimistic resilience. You've got to accept it, make the best of it. It's kind of like cognitive reframing that helps you get out of your mind kind of like swiveling and trying to feel sorry for yourself. The second type of the resilience is from another book that I read when I was a kid. I was a teenager. By then I went to the library, found this book on the shelf by Marcus Aurelius that now I think every startup founder knows. Is the Meditations. And I'm like, guys, I was there first. I read it when I was 13 or 14. The funny thing is that I picked it up and I was probably at that point in my emo goth years. I picked it up and I couldn't find it in the bookshop. So I ended up photocopying that book cover to cover. And I still have it at home. But there was actually one quote that really stuck with me. And it said, if the cucumber is bitter, throw it away. If there are brambles on the path, turn aside. Don't go on to say, why were things this sort ever brought into the world? And, the key point here is if something is really unpleasant for you, you've got to deal with it simply. Don't, add this extra suffering by dwelling on why it exists. And you're gifted with shaping your response. So, for example, if something happens in your organization overnight and, as an operations leader, you're in the position to somehow turn it over. You don't have the time to dwell on it. You need to do something about it. And I think this, again, like this is the quote that really stayed with me, and I think really shaped who I am today. I don't remember any other quote from that book. As you go through life, I think as any person, you will remember the moments or the sentences or the words or the people that really shaped you. So this is, I guess, like a stoic resilience, like accept, move on, all good. Then I'm Lithuanian, and we have a lot of, nice proverbs in Lithuanian, like nice sayings. It says, duoda imk, musha bėk. And it means if they give, take, if they hit, run. And it's a little bit of a survivalist. Know when you need to lean in and know when to disengage. Kind of pick your own battles. So I call this pragmatic resilience, like situational awareness. Just protect your energy. If this is not your battle, it's fine. Move on. You don't need to continue going at it.
So we have positive, optimistic resilience, which is reframing. Then we have don't sweat the small stuff. What were you calling it? The second one? Stoic resilience, of course, because stoicism. Yeah. And now the third was, I'm trying to think of what's another way of
pragmatic, like self-preservation.
So one of the things that I really like is from the Alcoholic Anonymous's prayer, which isn't actually a prayer. It seems like it should be coming from the Bible, which is like the strength to change the things I can, the accept the things that I can't, and the wisdom to tell the difference. And that seems to be number 3. Look at reality and accept reality, or change reality if you can change it, but do the right one with the right thing.
Exactly. I think it's also a combination of a stoic and pragmatic. Just take what you get and move on. And if it's too hard to change something, you don't have to. If it's not your battle to run. So I love your quote. We'll need to find that specific one.
Broadly, it sounds much nicer. And then what are the last 2?
The last one is, I guess like it's an English saying, you don't ask, you don't get. Because again, on operations, we always think that we're lone soldiers in the fields. And yes, we are cross-functional. And yes, we do things together with a team. But we don't have to fight the fight alone. Yes, operations is lonely, but you also have the rest of the company at your fingertips. You have the community at your fingertips. You have your network at your fingertips if you want to. So it's, the you don't ask, you don't get. And I think I would call it active resilience. It's like, be really constructive about the action that you want to take. Self-advocate for yourself. You don't need to suffer in silence. There are so many resources that you can count on. So I think as operations leaders, we just need to normalize seeking for help. And I will advertise my own community operations nation, where folks can come and find others in the same challenges. If you don't ask, you will definitely not get anything from anyone. So yes, agency and active resilience. And then the last one, like if all else fails, I feel like I have been dipping into this one a little bit too often lately, is completely zooming out, the existential resilience, and just visualizing your place in the universe. And I have used this so many times in my previous companies when things go wrong. And I think for me, I'm okay. I have built up my resilience, but then I look at my team who are maybe slightly more junior, and they're panicking that, out of a sudden, instead of BCCing everyone, they CC'd everyone in or something ridiculous. And it doesn't have to be the end of the world. So I think if you, at this point, tell your team that you're not running a nuclear plant, you're not operating children's hospital, and there will be cases where the risks are going to be high. So maybe this is not going to work in those instances, but just zooming out and reframing your problem and asking yourself, what is the real consequence here in this grand scheme of things, which really allows you to kind of shrink the perceived weight, like the perceived challenge, and at the same time create the mental space for solutions. Because again, I have been in so many companies, and I think operations teams are normally the level-headed ones. And then, sometimes other team members, they freak out and they're like, oh my God, like what will we do now that we have failed XYZ? it's always down to operations to resolve it. And I think it's always better to do it when you are zoomed out and this, more existential, more like, okay, this is a blip in the universe. 2 billion years from now, nobody will care.
Easier to find flow state that way when you're relaxed, even if it's a crisis for others. You're like, yeah, it's a challenge. It's a nice puzzle to solve. It'll be okay.
The other thought that I was having was around this question of imposter syndrome. How do you manage that as an operator?
I think, first of all, imposter syndrome is important to have a little bit of it, not a whole lot of it, because that will send you spinning in the wrong direction. But I do think that a little tinge of imposter syndrome is what keeps us sane, what keeps us aspiring to reach more, to learn, because we think every so often that we're not just there yet, like we're not enough. But a lot of the times it spins out of control. I had a very interesting experience with imposter syndrome after my first darling job. And I think a lot of operations leaders have that one place of work where they started maybe a little earlier on, and then they have developed into leadership position. That's exactly what happened to me at a company that I grew up as an operations leader. That company was called Y-Plan. And what happened there in the end, Y-Plan got sold to Timeout. I was made redundant in the process and I needed to find another role. And because it was my first venture into operations at that time, and that was about 7 years ago, I didn't really know anyone else who held a title head of operations director, COO. I had a very small network, and that network was mainly like a sales, marketing, product, engineers. Because 7 years ago in London, if you went to an event, you would normally meet everyone else but operations people. And that was also one of the reasons why me and my co-founders started Operations Nation. But about a year before, I was in a really dire situation where I found a job. I got an offer at an amazing company. It was called City Pantry, now just Eat for Business. And I had a gut feeling that I shouldn't accept it, but I did. I think this was the lowest point of my career because I couldn't perform to the best of my ability. And what happened, I went from digital marketplace, so from a marketplace to another marketplace. But the second marketplace, City Pantry, it was delivering hot food at rush hour from point A to point B in bulk. So it was catering lunches for businesses. And I really struggled to connect with the purpose of my role, which was ultimately, shaving off pennies really from the delivery costs. The team was lovely. The leadership team was great, although not similar to the leadership team that I was at before. Something didn't click. And the reason why I'm telling you about this in the context of imposter syndrome is that it put me to the bottom of it. I started questioning myself whether I am destined for operations in general. I started questioning myself whether I have any skills that I thought I was excelling at. It was a really bad place. And it came from me not trusting my gut feeling. But I think not everything in life is meant to work. And I think it was not my place to be. So I left City Pantry quite quickly. And afterwards, I have thrived in any other role that I have taken on. But I think for operations leaders, it's very easy to start feeling this weight of imposter syndrome when you're in the wrong situation and at the wrong place, because our roles, Bethany, like you say, are to do everything else that nobody else is doing. And you need to be extremely resourceful and you need to have that resilience. And, sometimes it's just not going to be the case because you are not going to have either certain skills or interest. And it's absolutely fine for you to, going back to my personal principles, pick your battle. You don't feel good in this. It's fine to walk away. And I think, again, for operations leaders, it's very important to understand exactly what your skill set is, because across, I don't even know how many things we can be taking care of, from finance to legal to compliance to HR to people ops to customer operations to, leading leadership teams. Like this glue is multifunctional, and you don't have to excel at every single piece of it. So I think understanding exactly where you're best and where you stand really helps you control that imposter syndrome.
So if I go on the other side of imposter syndrome, like there was something that was interesting what you said around you didn't trust your gut in retrospect, and also to be aware of what you're good at and what you're not good at. There's something else in there, which is not just what you're good at, but what you enjoy. Because I think as operations professionals, we're good at lots of things, but that doesn't mean that we should do them, which listening to your gut or your heart comes into play. And it's something that I think it takes experience to start to trust yourself. Do you have any, in retrospect, ways that you now trust your gut more than you used to, or hints for people who are learning to trust their intuition a bit more?
I'm not sure that I do. I think it definitely comes with experience and ability to question yourself and daring to question others. So I think especially earlier in your career when you're interviewing, you forget that you're also interviewing the company that you're going to be working for, that you can, in a way grill them in a very similar way that they're asking questions of you. But I think for me, it only came with experience, this, daring to really dig a little bit deeper. And I think when you're applying for a leadership position, that also gives you a little bit more permission, or at least you feel a little bit more permission to ask many, many more questions. And I think one of the principles that I've applied time and time again that really helped me is the 5 whys principle. Ask why 5 times. Ask the other person why 5 times, but also ask that of yourself. Because I think we're always preconditioned to, come up with solutions instead of seeing the real problem, and asking why 5 times in a row really enables you to get to the core situation that you're dealing with. So that's probably my best answer.
I'm curious, Bethany, on the imposter syndrome front. I don't know if you've spoken about this specifically, but do you recognize any of that in yourself?
Yeah, definitely. But I find for me, it comes when I'm not feeling good. So if I'm feeling unstable in a situation, I'll take too much responsibility. So it won't even just be like areas where I'm not doing a good job, but it'll be other people's areas where they're not doing a good job. And then I'll take it as my responsibility for like not going in and saving them from their bad job, or having hired them in the first place, or having not gotten rid of them in time, even if they don't report to me. So like when I'm not in a good place, I find reasons to explain to myself why I'm shit, versus when I'm in a good place, I can see the stories that I'm telling myself. But it can be really hard to identify that I'm doing that if I'm not feeling good. So it needs to be a bit of a check-in first of, am I in a good place or not? Rather than, and then just like ignoring the self-criticism that comes in.
One of the things that really helped me, actually, it was at the end of my plan. Actually, no, it was in the middle of my first company, and my boss was leaving, who had a title of VP operations, and he handed over his job to me and left. And he said, you're going to be doing your job and also my job on top, and you're great, and you will have absolutely no problem with it. And I was freaking out. And he was a guy that I really looked up to. And we had a kind of a heart-to-heart on his last day. And he said, every time that he goes into leadership meeting, he's not sure of himself. Like, he's not sure what he's going to say. He doubts himself all the time. And for me, who was just embarking to a leadership position in my first company, these were gold words to hear from a man who was, a decade older than me. He has just admitted to me that he's as scared sometimes as I am. And every time I find myself fearful of a situation, or I start experiencing, that imposter syndrome really hard, I think of him and I'll look around into the room and I think, well, every single person here is probably experiencing exactly the same thing. And that really calms me down. So it's a little bit on the existential resilience front.
Combined with you're not alone. Like we all have our demons to battle. Whether or not we're battling them on the same day doesn't mean that there aren't. Unless you're a sociopath, you're going to be feeling these things. And then sociopaths and narcissists are just so damaged that they've blocked it entirely from it. We have covered so much today. If our listeners can only take one thing away from today's episode, what is it?
As an operations leader, put your own oxygen mask first. So you can help your organization to thrive and survive when the shit hits the fan. And there you go, I swear.
Yay!
On that note, I will take my oxygen mask off and we will wrap up the operations room. Thank you for joining us. And if you like what you hear, please subscribe or leave us a comment, and we will see you next week.